Yo, how's it going, everybody? Swagkage here, and welcome to today's video. I don't really think I need to introduce the topic at hand. It's pretty obvious. We're going to be talking about Nen, but some of you may be wondering, Swagkage, you're a Naruto channel. You haven't even made a chakra video yet. Why are you making a Nen video, huh? And I get why this may be on some of your minds. It does seem a little bit weird, but here's the thing. Chakra is fundamentally very simple, and it's extremely easy to understand. It wouldn't take much for me to explain it at all. Nen, on the other hand, is really fucking complicated. So let's just get right into the meat of this. I'm not going to waste any time introducing the concept. Let's just start talking about what Nen is, how it works, and all of its different aspects. So to describe it most simply, Nen is practically Hunter x Hunter's counterpart to something like Ki or Chakra. While Nen itself isn't the actual power source that the fighters in this universe draw from, it's the name of the technique that people use to tame their power source and use it to create supernatural abilities. The name of the actual energy source is Aura, and Aura is conceptually identical to something like Ki, Chakra, Mana, or whatever else. It's life energy produced by the body, it's tied to vitality, it's like a secondary form of stamina, yada yada yada. If you've watched practically any other shonen anime, you know how this sort of thing works already. As is the case with most other fictional universes, most people aren't even aware of the existence of Aura. Despite that, everybody has it, and in theory, anybody's capable of taming it. Unsurprisingly though, doing so is generally really tough and requires the help of a pretty good teacher. Now this is where I think a Dragon Ball comparison is pretty apt, because Ki and Nen are pretty similar in this regard. Nen tutors aren't very plentiful, and in early Dragon Ball, Ki users weren't very common because the same was true about Ki tutors. There were like 2 people that could adequately teach others how to use Ki, and they were the Turtle Hermit Muten Roshi and the Crane Hermit Master Shen, both of whom were pretty picky about the students they were willing to teach. Now the key differences between Hunter x Hunter and Dragon Ball in this regard are that there are a lot more than 2 Nen tutors in the world of Hunter x Hunter, and that becoming a student of one of them is a lot more straightforward. Another thing worth pointing out is that while Ki isn't hidden from the public by any one person or group of people in Dragon Ball, the Hunter Association has made a consistent, historic effort to keep Nen out of the public eye. Most members of the Hunter Association agree that if Nen were to become common knowledge among the masses, it would lead to a lot of problems. As a matter of fact, the Dark Continent arc has already taken steps to explore this idea by providing a pretty concrete example of somebody who should never, ever learn how to use Nen properly, in the form of a very corrupt, psychopathic Prince of Kaiken who holds a lot of political power and might end up being king of one of the most prominent countries in the world very shortly. Now, at the time of this video, this is a very recent plot development, but anyway, the point is, the Hunter Association likes to keep Nen out of the hands of people like this for pretty obvious reasons. Because the Hunter Association seems to have near complete control over the spread of information regarding Nen, the only way to gain access to this information is to become a member of the Hunter Association yourself. So, in much more practical terms, to learn how to use Nen, you've basically just got to pass the Hunter exam. Now, this isn't strictly true, because after passing the Hunter exam, it's not like people are immediately provided with a tutor. In most cases, it seems like all of the characters who have learned how to use Nen had to track down a teacher themselves, and there are a handful of characters who learned how to use Nen before becoming hunters, like Hisoka, Illumi, and Killua, but these are outliers, so treat them as the exception, not the rule. The series also brings attention to a group of people that multiple characters, rather unimaginatively, refer to as Nen geniuses, who are capable of using Nen without even realizing that they're doing it and without any proper training. This is how the series explains the existence of people like superhuman athletes, fortune tellers, and other people who possess rather odd abilities, I guess in order to establish a sort of parallel between itself and the real world. The basic premise is that somebody like Bruce Lee would be considered a Nen genius, though some in-universe examples include Neon, the girl with the fortune-telling powers, and Komugi, the Gungi world champion. So okay, up to this point, Nen might sound a little bit generic. You might be thinking to yourself, well, it does have a few unique concepts incorporated into it, but for the most part, it sounds pretty similar to something like Ki or Chakra. But just wait, this is the part where shit starts to get really complicated and then starts to develop an identity of its own. So let's start out with the training process that a person needs to undergo in order to learn how to use Nen. It's very lengthy, and it involves mastering a bunch of different concepts, and because of this, it took both Gon and Killua multiple arcs to develop just a ground-level, basic understanding of everything that Nen entails, including all of its major principles and most of its mechanics. Step 1 of the training is pretty standard and just involves the conditioning of one's body to be able to manipulate the flow of their aura so that they can properly use Nen at a basic level. This can be done one of 2 ways. The first method is very safe, but extremely time-consuming, whereas the second method is very quick, but equally dangerous, and as such is frowned upon by most members of the Hunter Association. Now, both methods do accomplish the same thing. They're just 2 different approaches to carrying out the the same process, which is to allow the aura nodes in a person's body to open, giving them the ability to control the flow of their aura. The first of these is done organically and gradually, through meditation and other forms of spiritual training, whereas the second involves another person forcing these aura nodes open, which, as you may expect, leaves a lot of room for something bad to happen. Particularly if the person either doesn't know what they're doing or just feels like being a dick, it can result in the death of the person on the receiving end, which is why it's widely frowned upon and isn't typically used. It's explained that one way to force a person's aura nodes open is to unleash a malicious aura attack onto them, pressuring their body to instinctively awaken its aura in order to defend themselves, as if it does not do so, the person will likely end up either dead or severely injured. Wing, the mentor who taught Gon and Killua how to use Nen, knows of a much safer method of doing this that involves manually jolting the aura nodes in a person's body open, safely giving them access to basic Nen use without having to go through the lengthy meditation process. Aside from the slight risk of death or serious injury, this method doesn't seem to carry any negative side effects since it's how Gon and Killua had their aura nodes awakened, and they both seem to be doing just fine. On a side note, after having one's aura nodes awakened, it becomes apparent to the person in question that aura is invisible to most people. The only way a person can see it is if the aura nodes in their eyes have been opened, which is why to most people, Hisoka seemed to be performing actual magic tricks during his battle with Castro, when in reality, he was just using bungee gum, and by extension his aura, to pull off a lot of the insane shit that we saw throughout that fight. As a matter of fact though, Hisoka's aura should have been invisible to many Nen users as well, as it took Killua and Zushi using Gyo to be able to see it. Now, I haven't even explained what Gyo is yet, so let's move on to Nen's advanced techniques and its 4 major principles. Gaining the ability to control the flow of one's aura is just the beginning of learning how to use Nen. There are a lot of ways that it can be applied, and all of these applications are given their own unique name. The first 4 of these applications, Nen's 4 major principles, are considered the most basic ways that a person's aura can be employed, and learning each of them is practically mandatory for developing a basic understanding of Nen's fundamentals. The first of these applications is called Ten, which means envelop or shroud. This is without question the easiest way to employ one's Nen. It's nothing more than the simple practice of keeping one's aura nodes open at all times, though it also involves containing the aura that should now be leaking out of a person's body in a neat and compact shape that surrounds the user's body in a visible shroud. For most people, Ten begins as an active technique that one must remain focused on to perform, though with constant practice, one can make Ten into a passive ability that they are able to maintain subconsciously. Ten doesn't do a whole lot aside from acting as the foundation for most of Nen's other applications, though mastering it does provide a handful of benefits. The first is that a master of Ten will experience decreased aging, as they are able to keep their vital energy contained around them and prevent it from leaking out of their body, thus causing it to decay slower and allow them to live a longer life. The second is that Ten protects a person from basic malicious Nen attacks, like the one Illumi used on Killua during the Hunter exam, and the one that Hisoka used to test both Gon and Killua at Heaven's Arena. Ten also serves to defend its user from basic physical attacks that aren't amped by aura, though it won't really do much in a battle against another Nen user. The next application, Ren, meaning enhance, focuses on bolstering a person's physical capabilities, namely their strength and durability. This is accomplished by increasing the amount of aura the body outputs, and can be used to amp the strength of basic physical attacks or increase the effectiveness of one of Nen's other applications. By training to use this technique, a person can not only increase the length for which they are able to maintain Ren, but they can also increase the amount of aura that they have at their disposal. Getting any sort of significant results takes a lot of time, however. According to Bisky, the average person takes about a month to increase the duration of their Ren by 10 minutes out of combat. Anyway, as you'd expect, using Ren comes at the cost of draining one's aura supply faster. To explain it practically, just imagine you're playing Skyrim, and you use a spell that increases the power of all your other spells, but causes your magic meter to drain twice as fast. Pretty simple and easy to understand. Now, most of the time, Ren can't do anything by itself. It functions to boost the effectiveness of anything it's used in conjunction with. But in very situational instances, it can be used offensively. If malicious Ren is projected at a target who is either incapable of using Nen or is not currently surrounded by Ten, they may be vulnerable to one of many different side effects, all of which are negative, including things like paralysis and even death. I already mentioned a few examples of this happening in the series, Illumi using it on Killua and Hisoka using it on both Gon and Killua, but as I explained earlier, the use of Ten alone is generally enough to protect a person from these negative effects. One final thing worth noting is that Ten can be used in combination with Ren to contain the explosive amount of aura being released from the body, meaning that a person can still exercise control over their power even while it's being amplified. The next of these applications is Zetsu, not that kind. Zetsu, or null. Zetsu is basically just a technique that reverts a person back to the state they were in when they weren't able to use Nen. It closes off their aura nodes, which both cuts off their use of Ten and stops any rogue aura from leaking out of their body. Zetsu has a handful of different potential uses, but it's incredibly dangerous and ill-advised to use Zetsu unless absolutely necessary because it leaves a person extremely vulnerable. Like I just explained, Ren loaded with nothing more than hostility is enough to kill somebody who isn't protected by 10, so getting hit by a full power Ren punch while in Zetsu is probably really painful. Zetsu is mainly used for stealth though, since closing off one's aura nodes makes them impossible for other Nen users to detect, at least in most cases. It's possible to get around this. For instance, if you use Zetsu in close proximity to another Nen user and you have a strong enough aura, they'll sense the disappearance of your Nen, which may do even more to alert them to your presence than not activating Zetsu at all would have. Additionally, Nobunaga and Machi were aware that Gon and Killua were tailing them despite their efforts to mask their aura, so it seems that somebody keen enough can detect the presence of somebody nearby even if they are using Zetsu, though they may not be able to determine that person's exact whereabouts. According to Wing, shutting off the flow of aura is also helpful for relieving fatigue, presumably because it allows the body to rest temporarily by stopping the outward flow of energy. The last of the 4 basic principles is Hatsu, or release, and Hatsu's getting its own video. It is without a doubt the most complex aspect of Nen, and there's no way I'd be able to explain it here without making the video like 30 minutes. So before then, let's go over some of Nen's more high-level techniques. These are all applications of Nen that draw from one of the 4 major principles by applying an advanced form of one or more of them to achieve something that a person normally wouldn't be able to when using one of the basic applications. So the first and most simple of these is In, or conceal, and it's basically just a better version of Zetsu. In makes a person's aura impossible to perceive, but it doesn't completely strip them of it. So in other words, aura will still flow from a user of In's body, it just becomes impossible for anybody to see or detect it using any means whatsoever. Well, almost any means whatsoever, actually, but I'll get more into that in just a sec. Anyway, like Zetsu, In is an incredible stealth tool and can even be used on Nen-based constructs, like Kurapika's Nen chains, for example. It's also how Hisoka was able to hide his bungee gum from Castro, like I mentioned earlier. The only way that In can be countered directly is by using Gyo, another advanced Nen technique. Now, I mentioned Gyo earlier, but didn't explain it in any amount of detail. Gyo, or focus, is an advanced form of Ren where a person expels a large amount of aura as they would when using Ren normally, then allocates it to a specific part of their body. Gyo can be used to counter In by condensing aura into the user's eyes, which significantly augments their eyesight and allows them to see suppressed aura and Nen constructs. Of course, it can also be used in many other ways, such as by concentrating all of one's aura into that person's fist, or doing the exact same thing but with one's foot instead, which would make that person's next punch or kick respectively much stronger than it normally would be, even when using a basic form of Ren. Of course, Gyo leaves all but one area of a person's body without any aura to protect itself, leaving them extremely vulnerable to any potential oncoming Nen attacks. Aside from this though, Gyo doesn't seem to have any drawbacks. Next up is Shu, or enfold, which is probably the most basic advanced Nen technique conceptually speaking. Shu simply allows a person to extend the reach of their aura so that it envelops an object. This is how Guido was able to power up the tops that he used in his battle against Gon at Heaven's Arena, and Gon and Killua chose to cast the technique on a shovel when they were learning how to use it during their training on Greed Island. Shu does more than simply power up the affected object. It allows a person to use that object as an extension of their own body. This of course explains why Gon took so much damage after being hit by the tops that Guido was controlling, because in theory the tops packed just as much of a punch as Guido himself would have. Now these next few applications are all combinations of one or more of the 4 major principles. N, or circle, begins as an advanced form of Ren, where a person employs Ren and then uses N to extend the radius of their aura. Normally, when using Ren, a person's aura only takes up a very small amount of space, as it takes the form of a layer that's only about a few millimeters thick. To properly use N, a person has to extend the radius of their aura to at least 2 meters before using 10 to contain their aura and give it proper shape. Most of the time it takes the shape of a circle, though this isn't always the case as seen with Piru. Anyway, the point of N is to give a person Sage Mode-esque sensory capabilities. Nobunaga explains that N allows him to feel the shape and movement of anything that enters his circle, and further explains, quote, "A true master can count with his eyes closed the number of leaves falling around him and detect an assassin 50 meters away." Now, while 50 meters might sound like an extremely large radius, especially considering Nobunaga's is only 4 meters, Xeno-fucking-Zoldike has an N radius of 300 meters, and one of the royal ants, Pidu, can sense everything within a radius of 2 kilometers. Anyway, for most people, N-use burns through a lot of aura very quickly, so it's not something that they can maintain for very long, but it's an extremely effective technique when one suspects that they might be in danger, and when used with full mastery, or to the absurd degree that Pidu manages it, it acts as an excellent security tool, relaying to the user everything that goes on within a ridiculously large amount of space. Now then, up next is Ken, another combination of both Ren and Ten. Ken, or Fortify, is basically just this really thick aura shield. It involves using Ren to output 10 times the amount of aura a person normally does, before using Ten to condense all of that energy into the space that aura normally takes up. The result is an incredibly dense aura barrier that's extremely good at defending against all kinds of attacks. Now, obviously, this is an extremely tiring ability to use, but it works really well. It defends against techniques from any direction, and it's without a doubt the best defensive counter to Ko. Ko, or Temper, is an offensive application of Nen that uses Ten, Zetsu, Ren, Hatsu, and Gyo all at the same time. Like Gyo, it involves focusing all of a person's aura into one part of the body, with the additional use of Zetsu to completely stop aura flowing to any parts of the body that the user has not specified. Now, this is extremely dangerous to use because it leaves a person even more vulnerable than Gyo does, but Bisky explains that it is a seriously powerful application of Nen, and it's capable of doing severe damage to somebody even if they're using Nen to protect themselves. The final application of Nen is called Ryu, or Flow, and it is an advanced application of two advanced applications at the same time. It's a little bit complicated, but yeah, anyway, Ryu uses both Gyo and Ken in combination with one another. This is probably the most complicated of the abilities that I've talked about so far, since it involves altering the amount of aura distributed to a person's individual body parts in real time throughout the course of a battle. A person performs Ken to create a thick veil of aura around themselves before using Gyo to slightly redistribute this aura to various parts of their body. It allows a person to both defensively and offensively employ Nen at the same time, and aside from Hatsu, is probably the aspect of Nen that gives its users the most freedom in combat. To provide an example of how it's used, Gon could distribute 70% of his aura to his leg in order to increase the power of an oncoming kick, while leaving 30% of it to defend the rest of his body. Then, after landing this kick, he could immediately distribute 90% of it to his arm in order to greatly amplify the strength of an oncoming punch, and so on and so forth. Though it takes the longest amount of time to master out of all of the non-Hatsu Nen techniques, it allows its users to employ their aura more efficiently than any of the other techniques do, as it allows them to repeatedly and rapidly choose which part of their body they either want to defend or augment the strength of. Anyway, I'm pretty sure that covers all of Nen's basics. Next week, I'm going to be explaining Hatsu and everything related to it, so look forward to that. But when I do get into Hatsu and all of that other shit, I'm going to be talking about a lot more spoilery stuff. Now, real quick, for those of you who still haven't watched Hunter x Hunter yet, but may have had your interest piqued by this video, I have a solution for you. Verve was kind enough to sponsor this video, and for those of you who are unaware, Verve's a congregate app for a whole bunch of different content providers like Machinima, RiffTrax, Rooster Teeth, and a handful of others, but because of how much I talk about anime on this channel, I'm pretty sure that the two you guys are going to be the most interested in are Crunchyroll and Funimation. Most of you have probably heard of both of these by now. Across the two of these apps, you can watch just about any anime under the sun, including Hunter x Hunter, Yu Yu Hakusho, which was made by Yoshihiro Togashi, the same guy who wrote Hunter x Hunter, Dragon Ball Super, Cowboy Bebop, Code Geass, My Hero Academia, Attack on Titan, Psycho-Pass, and a whole bunch of others. So make sure you click the link in the description and check out what they have to offer. Speaking of, if you use this link, you'll get a free ad-free 30-day trial of Verve Premium, which will get you access to all of the content I just mentioned for a full free 30 days, but make sure you act quickly because the promotion isn't going on forever. It ends early January, and after that, it'll revert back to a 7-day free trial. If you need anything else to convince you, you can also watch everything on it without an internet connection, which is pretty dope. So, like, if you find yourself stranded on top of Mount Everest for whatever reason, I mean, at the very least, you can pull out your phone and start watching some Naruto or whatever. So once again, click the link in the description, get yourself some free anime, help the channel out in the process, and if you find out you don't like Verve enough to pay for it, then you can just cancel your membership. No big deal. Anyhow, that covers just about everything that I had to talk about, so hope you guys are looking forward to the Hatsu video next week. Make sure to stay tuned for that. Most importantly, though, hope you guys have a fantastic new year. Till my next video, talk to you later. Swagkage out. Bye.